Bye-bye.
Thanks, Louise. 80,000 young salmon are due to be released into the River Dove in Staffordshire today. It's the first stage of a 5-year programme. For over a century now, salmon have been a rare sight in the Dove. Many disappeared when it became polluted during the Industrial Revolution. The Trent Salmon Trust, which is launched today, will restock the river once a year and build fish passes in weirs to help the salmon on their way. Don't forget, Midlands Today is at 1:30 and 6:30, and I'll have more for you in half an hour.
From a time the world forgot. Walking with Beasts. Released tomorrow at 8:30 on BBC One.
Hello, welcome to Breakfast from BBC News.
It's 8 o'clock. Good morning and welcome to the programme. The headlines this morning. In Afghanistan, the Northern Alliance say they've surrounded up to 20,000 Taliban troops in the last pocket of resistance in the north.
There are reports of uprisings against the Taliban across the country following a day of celebrations in Kabul.
Thousands more British troops are put on standby for security missions in Afghanistan.
And rattling noises in the cockpit are revealed by the black box recovered from the New York plane crash site.
It's now 24 hours since the Taliban fled Kabul and Northern Alliance soldiers moved in.
Kabul is quiet. People are returning to work. American special forces are said to be operating in the city as the search goes on for Osama bin Laden.
In the last pocket of resistance in the north, in Kunduz, up to 20,000 Taliban troops are reported to be surrounded.
The UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan and members of the international coalition have stressed the need to work towards a new broad-based government in Afghanistan.
The deposed former Afghan President Rabbani is reported to be planning to return to Kabul to pronounce himself head of the territories under the control of anti-Taliban forces.
In a few moments, we'll be live from Kabul and from the area approaching Kunduz.
First, though, here's Maura with the main news this morning.
Morning to you. There are reports of uprisings in Taliban-controlled areas across Afghanistan. In what appears to be their last stand in the north, about 20,000 Taliban troops are holding out in the city of Kunduz, according to the Northern Alliance. In Kabul, opposition forces have been consolidating their hold on power.
Back to work in Kabul, but not for everybody. These trucks carrying multiple rocket launchers were in action 2 days ago. Not now. Kabul's businesses are opening their doors to a city very different from the one they'd endured for the past 5 years. People here are allowing themselves the luxury of hoping that for once, the soldiers who've caused so much suffering may at last bring peace. In one of its first acts, the new administration lifted many of the rules and restrictions that this city so deeply despised. Girls can go to school, women should return to their jobs. This day is remarkable precisely because it is so ordinary. This country has a long and very violent history of bloody military takeovers, and as little as 24 hours ago, nobody could have dared hope that things would turn out quite so well. With the Northern Alliance's lightning advance and the collapse of the Taliban came fears of the usual bloodbath. But the bulk of the fighters held back. The alliance leadership knows that to behave as invaders means losing international support. Then the jubilation, less welcoming the new militia as celebrating the end of a hated regime. But Afghans also know that their fractious politicians have a lot of work to do before they can believe in a peaceful future. Peter Grester, BBC News, Kabul.
The international coalition partners have stressed the need to work towards a new broad-based government in Afghanistan. The UN Security Council has ended a debate in which most members supported plans to establish a multi-ethnic government.
We are inviting the Afghans. We hope that they will respond positively, and we are trying to organize a place where we can meet with them. The Northern Alliance plus those who are involved in these processes.
Thousands more British troops have been put on standby, ready to be sent to Afghanistan at very short notice. It's thought they'll be part of a stabilising force to help the UN set up an interim government as well as to protect aid convoys.
4 1,200 British troops, such as these Royal Marines on exercise in Oman, are already in operation in the Afghanistan region. Now the government is thinking about sending what it calls several thousand more. The Ministry of Defence confirmed to the BBC last night that these troops are now on 48 hours' notice to leave. This was two para about to fly to Macedonia earlier this year. They're now preparing to go to Afghanistan. Also getting ready to go are the 16th Air Assault Brigade, along with specialist units from the Royal Engineers. These soldiers will not carry out offensive operations against the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. Their role has not yet been clearly defined, but a priority could well be to assist United Nations efforts to install an interim government. The fall of Kabul to the Northern Alliance has created a highly unstable situation in the country. In the capital, looting and lynching has been reported. The UN confirmed yesterday that up to 100 Taliban supporters were massacred during the seizure of Mazar al-Sharif. It now seems that British troops are to be heavily involved in trying to stabilise this war-torn country. Claire Marshall, BBC News.
Well, earlier in the programme, the former Foreign Secretary David Owen said America's war on terrorism should not end with the action in Afghanistan. He said there was a need for possible military action in other countries.
I have no doubt whatever that the next step the Americans will take will be to go to Iraq, and I hope the Europeans will show more understanding of it. Personally, I think probably Russia will show more understanding of the need to grapple with Iraq. Having done Iraq, we will have to do something more active on the Middle East and Arab-Israeli dispute, and we'll also have to deal with Syria.
President Bush has told the Russian leader Vladimir Putin that America will cut its nuclear arsenal by about 2/3 in the next 10 years. The announcement came after talks in which Mr. Putin said Russia would aim to match the cuts. The two leaders will now try to resolve the more divisive issue of America's national missile defense plans. Investigators looking into Monday's American Airlines plane crash in New York say they've made a major breakthrough. The cockpit voice recorder has revealed there were rattling noises on board seconds before the aircraft came down in New York City. It's also been revealed that a British woman is among the dead.
Investigators are desperately trying to work out what caused Flight 587 to break up in mid-air, raining wreckage, including this engine, onto houses below. A preliminary inspection of this and the other engine reveals no sign of an in-flight explosion, but the black box flight recorders, which were flown to Washington for analysis, suggest that the aircraft was in trouble less than 2 minutes after takeoff. The voice recorder captured a rattling sound, followed by chaos in the cockpit. It points, investigators believe, to a mystery mechanical problem.
So far, all the information we have is consistent with an accident. We have no information that would argue for criminal activity or anything that indicates sabotage or terrorism to date.
For a community living in the flight path of one of the world's busiest airports, the fact that this disaster is being blamed on mechanical failure would normally be a cause of concern. Yet bearing in mind how many people here lost friends and loved ones in the World Trade Center, the overwhelming feeling is one of relief that on this occasion, terrorism doesn't appear to have been to blame. David Willis, BBC News, New York.
President Bush has signed an order that will allow special military courts to be established to try foreigners accused of terrorist offences. A spokesman said the use of military rather than civilian courts gave the president an additional tool to bring those responsible for the September 11th attacks to justice. The uncle of the missing teenager, Danielle Jones, is to appear in court charged with her murder. The 15-year-old girl was last seen in June when she left her home to catch a bus to school. Stuart Campbell is 43 and comes from Grays in Essex. A huge police search has failed to find Danielle's body. Terminally ill Diane Pretty will go to the House of Lords today to seek a ruling that her husband will not be prosecuted if he helps her to commit suicide. Mrs. Pretty, who suffers from motor neurone disease, is paralysed from the neck down. She lost a High Court appeal last month when the judges ruled that whilst they were sympathetic to her case, it was essential to protect the vulnerable and the dying. That's it. I'll be back at past. Right now, over to Sean.
Thank you very much. Well, let's go straight now to Kabul, 24 hours after the place was liberated, and speak to a correspondent there, Peter Grester. Peter, what's it like there this morning?
very, very peaceful indeed. Certainly far more peaceful than anybody here could have hoped for or could have imagined, I think. But there are concerns, of course, about the political future of this country. Everyone who lived here during the early 1990s will remember the bitter internecine fighting between the factions that left vast sections of this city completely flattened and more than 50,000 people dead. And people are very, very concerned that the factions involved with the Northern Alliance may end up splitting apart if the political negotiations don't go ahead very, very quickly and if there isn't significant international pressure to hold them together.
Indeed. And does the place feel like it's under control? I mean, how is the city being run?
It certainly does feel under control. We've seen troops out in the streets this morning. I was out talking to people, and the strong sense we got was a city very much operating as normal. Of course, this really isn't a normal situation. There is no administration to speak of, and the Northern Alliance is doing its best to form some kind of administration. It will take some time for them to do that, and I think they're also trying to tread a very, very fine line between appearing to govern Afghanistan and govern Kabul on the one hand, and trying to operate the city, keeping it functioning and operating as it should do.
It must be very difficult because, as you say, on the one hand, they've been liberated and they can now have their beards shaved off and women can appear in public. And on the other hand, we're also seeing summary executions in the city. It must be a very strange mood there.
It's strange in some respects, but I think the executions that we saw were almost inevitable. As you say, people were doing all the sorts of things immediately after the Taliban left, like shaving off their beards, playing music, flying kites, women were taking off their burqas and so on. And I think these are the sorts of things that were very much in reaction to the Taliban's regime. The flip side of that, of course, was the executions and the beatings that we saw, the brutality towards the very few remaining Taliban that were here. But that was very much yesterday's event. And at the moment today, people are very much looking forward, trying to work out how on earth the political crisis is going to resolve itself. This is still a very, very long way from over. And I think people know that the political negotiations could well fall apart, provided, as I said, there isn't the significant international pressure that they really need.
I mean, I know it's very early days, but are people talking to you about what kind of future they would like to see?
I think it really is too early for people to look that far ahead. I know that there is talk about King Zahir Shah coming back, and that's a very popular option, particularly in the Pashto South, because that's the same ethnic group that the king is from. But at the same time, you must remember that the reason that the king was deposed in the first place was because of the deep dissatisfaction with the kind of regime that he led. So it is a very, very complicated situation, and one that isn't going to resolve itself easily.
OK, Peter, in Kabul, thanks very much for joining us.
Kunduz is one of the few areas in northern Afghanistan still to have a sizable Taliban presence. Our correspondent John Soper, we've been trying to raise him unsuccessfully for this hour anyway. He's been travelling with alliance troops. He spoke to us earlier on in the programme.
What we're hearing from the Northern Alliance is that they believe there are some 20,000 Taliban soldiers dug into the city. What's more ominous, I think, is that they believe that 10,000 of them are foreign soldiers, maybe Chechens or Arabs. In the past, when there have been that sort of combination, there have been big reprisals. I think that if there are that many foreign fighters there, it will be a very bloody battle indeed, and ugly too.
John Sopel speaking to us a little bit earlier. It's now 12 minutes past 8. You're watching Breakfast from BBC News. The main stories this morning. In Afghanistan, Northern Alliance troops are heading for the northern city of Kunduz, where there are unconfirmed reports that 20,000 Taliban troops are dug in.
The Ministry of Defence has put thousands more British troops on standby to go out to Afghanistan.
Investigators looking into Monday's plane crash in New York say the cockpit voice recorder has revealed rattling noises on board seconds before the aircraft came down. A British woman is now known to be among the dead.
And also coming up in the programme, we'll be live from the English countryside, where some of our rarest flora and fauna is threatened by climate change. Dominic McKilligan was jailed for life 2 years ago for the murder of an 11-year-old boy. A report into the handling of the case comes out in Newcastle later this morning. Our social affairs correspondent, Sue Littlemore, we hope is there. We're trying to reach her, but I don't think we're going to be able to go to it just now. We're going to go now, though, instead to something about the main story this morning, which is Afghanistan. The latest that's been going on today is that Kabul is relatively quiet after the jubilation and celebrations of yesterday. There is concern, there's tension there about what might happen in the future, because of course the Northern Alliance, who used to be known as the Mujahideen, took the city last in 1992, and there was a lot of bloodshed, a lot of disorder, a lot of slaughter just after that.
And as Peter was telling us earlier, there have been summary executions, at least there were yesterday, and we're hearing the UNHCR yesterday talking about massacres in Mazar-e-Sharif as well. They think about 100 Taliban soldiers who weren't actually fighting at that stage were massacred by the Northern Alliance. So
a lot of concern in Kunduz as well. Let's go back now to the story that we were trying to get to you before, which is the case of Dominic McKilligan, a man who was jailed for life 2 years ago for the murder of an 11-year-old boy. There's a report into the handling of the case coming out of Newcastle later on this morning. Here's our social affairs correspondent, Sue Littlemore. She's there. She's going to tell us all about it. Sue, could you remind us a little bit about the background to this case?
Yes, well, when Dominic McKilligan was 18 years old, he was convicted of the murder of the 11-year-old schoolboy Wesley Neely. And when he was convicted of that, it emerged that McKilligan had a history of paedophilia. When he was just 14, he was put into care and supervision order, effectively sentenced for 3 years because of a string of attacks on young boys who were aged between 7 and 11 when McKilligan was living in Bournemouth. These were boys that were repeatedly sexually abused by him and tortured. He was put into a supervision care order, a sentence if you like. He was too young to go to jail, up in the northeast of England, and was supposed to be treated for his sexual behaviour. It was within 10 months of being released from that care and supervision order from a secure unit in the northeast of England that he killed Wesley in Newcastle. He was completely unsupervised in the community, and the question is, of course, how it was that all the authorities, none of the authorities who had any contact to do with McKilligan, informed people in the community that he was such a dangerous man, and he ended up committing this murder.
And that presumably is what the report is going to be all about.
Yes, the report is going to look at local agencies here, social services in Bournemouth, Durham and Newcastle, police forces locally. But I predict that this will have wide implications for the general debate about how we treat paedophiles. Now, McKilligan missed going on the sex offenders register by 1 day. The sex offenders register kicked in the day after he was released. Now people will say, the authorities will say, the government will say, we have the sex offenders register now. We are better at dealing with paedophiles, known sex offenders, when they are released into the community. We are, they will argue, in a different era now compared with when McKilligan was released. But there are still many people who feel that the way we treat sex offenders now, the fact that general communities are not told about the whereabouts of sex offenders through the sex offenders register, isn't good enough. This will, I'm sure, reopen the debate about how we treat paedophiles and whether we are properly protecting our communities from known sex offenders.
OK, Sue Littlemore, thanks for joining us.
Now, scientists are telling us today that our wildlife will change dramatically over the next 50 years because of climate change. Let's hear more on this. Dr. Pam Berry from the Environmental Change Institute is at Beacon Hill in Newbury. Good morning to you. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. This is quite a worrying thing, isn't it? The climate change is going to dramatically alter our countryside. How so?
I don't think it's anything to be too worried about, because some species will actually gain in terms of being able to perhaps respond positively to climate change, while there will be some species which will start to lose out. So I don't see it as worrying, it's just a matter of change.
Oh, that's good news then. Still, I suppose some of the rarest wildlife will go. What do you anticipate will become extinct?
Well, the most severe species that we saw was the small mountain ringlet, which currently occurs in Scotland, and that could totally go by the 2050s, and certainly the capercaillie might well follow. But I think one should remember that we also have possibilities to try and manage the environment for these species, to try and reduce the impacts of climate change too.
Really? I mean, what can you do to protect the animals from it?
Well, I think we have to make sure we provide suitable conditions for them to grow. Here at Beacon Hill, we're talking about chalk grassland, and there it is important that we manage it by grazing it or mowing it to prevent trees and shrubs coming in and taking over the chalk grassland.
And you say that species in the south could gain from this. Does that mean we're going to see more of certain types of animals?
Well, certainly, yes. Species which currently occur in southern England could start to move northwards. So we could look at species like willow tits would start perhaps to lose suitable climate space in southern England, but other species like the reed warbler and turtle dove would have the potential to expand northwards, providing that they have suitable habitat and food supply.
And we see this happening in how many years?
Well, I think over the next 50 years would be the sort of time scale that we're talking about.
Dr. Panbury, thank you very much for joining us.
Let's go back to Afghanistan. After the recent spectacular gains by the Northern Alliance, thousands of Afghan refugees are now heading back to their homes. Some of the fiercest battles of the war have taken place close to the border with Tajikistan, but local people now believe it's safe to return.
Momon is a frightened man with an uncertain future. He's from the Punjab in Pakistan, a foreign soldier fighting for the Taliban. He was captured by the Northern Alliance in a fierce battle near to where he is now being held prisoner in a rudimentary jail. His captors say the people of Afghanistan will decide what happens to him next. He would not tell me why he'd joined the Taliban. He did say he was being well treated, but I could hear the fear in his voice and see it in his eyes. In the battle near the Tajikistan border, he was fighting alongside other foreign soldiers. Those who escaped have fled to Kunduz, holed up with nowhere to go. Many expect them to fight to the death. Meanwhile, the people of North Afghanistan have started to return to the homes that some of them left years ago. Many will walk for days.
As well as having this river to cross, refugees heading home into what was Taliban-held territory have a very hazardous journey on the other side. The whole of the area is said to be littered with landmines.
But they are determined to go. After more than 20 years of war, they now want to return home to live in peace. Adam Minot, BBC News, Northern Afghanistan.
Lovely pictures there in a troubled land.
Yes, exactly, and more on the troubled land as well. We're getting some reports in from Reuters. From Jalalabad, apparently a former Mujahideen group led by Malvi Yunus Khalis has taken control of Jalalabad. That's in the eastern part of Afghanistan. That's according to the Pakistan-based Afghan Islamic press, which is usually quite reliable, actually. They're saying that the deputy of Mullah Mohammed Omar, the Taliban supreme leader, has been driven from the area as well. More on that if we get it a little later on the programme.
Let's go to the weather now. Helen's got it.
Good morning to you both. Good morning all. A crisp and sunny start here in London, many eastern parts of England this morning. So icy patches on the roads and on the cars could be a problem. But in Glasgow, we have other problems this morning. You'll have to take my word for it that it is Glasgow. We're not going to dwell on it too long, but it is a foggy start here this morning and other parts of southeast Scotland. So that's something to watch out for you if you're driving up in the southeast of Scotland. Also icy patches affecting some parts of England and Wales just for the next hour or so, and that should clear. Elsewhere in Scotland, away from the foggy areas, some sunshine as you can see on the cars. The next blanket of cloud heading towards the northwest will bring some change this afternoon. We've also got a little bit of patchy drizzle through the West Midlands, parts of South Wales, and still one or two wintry showers running into East Anglia. Yes, there could even be some hail and sleet in those once again today. But that cloud across in western parts of the Midlands will slowly slip southwards by lunchtime, getting into the southwest Midlands, so a cloudier spell around the lunchtime period. But that should then clear out of the way this afternoon and the skies will brighten behind it. So a lot of dry and bright weather around for England and Wales come this afternoon. For Scotland and Northern Ireland, however, it will turn cloudier with some patchy rain and drizzle coming in. At least it'll get a little milder here. Temperatures in Belfast say up to around 10 degrees Celsius because that air will be coming in off the Atlantic. For the rest of us, despite the sunshine, it is going to be another cold day. Not as cold as yesterday because we've lost the strong northerly wind, but still just 5 or 6 degrees where the cloud lingers the longest. And temperatures really will drop like a stone this evening and overnight. It's going to be a pretty cold night in the south. probably -3 or -4 in some rural parts of England and Wales. It will be temporarily quite chilly for northern England, but here the temperatures will rise later in the night, and it will be a mild night for Scotland and Northern Ireland, because we'll still have that cloud starting to travel southwards into northern England, eventually North Wales by morning. Mist and fog underneath that cloud bank, and indeed in the south tomorrow morning, could well be a problem, as we're seeing in Scotland this morning. So come tomorrow, there'll be a lot of cloud around through central regions, and it'll start to slip southwards. So after a bright start in the south, the fog clearing, but more cloud coming along, and then a lot of dry weather Thursday and Friday. Perhaps better chance of some sunshine in eastern Scotland on Friday. It is a very settled picture, even as we head into the weekend, with high pressure in charge, but again fog and frost by night will become more of a problem. Back to Sian and Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Helen.
The Ministry of Defence has put thousands more British troops on standby to go out to Afghanistan. We are told they will not be used to attack the Taliban, but they're in reserve to act as peacekeepers. The Defence Minister, Adam Ingram, joins us now. Thanks for coming on the programme. Thousands, exactly how many thousands of troops are we talking about?
It's a substantial number of troops. We've not put a precise figure on it at this stage, because the future deployment has not yet been determined. However, we put our key elements of our Joint Rapid Reaction Force on immediate standby, ready to move once that decision has been taken.
Are we talking about the kind of things that they might have done in Kosovo after NATO went in there?
Very similar. Sierra Leone, Kosovo, Macedonia, we could look at recent involvement of British troops, what they've delivered and what they've achieved. We have a very high level of success. We're well respected, working alongside our allies and coalition forces, and we bring particular expertise in this particular type of environment.
Are we talking about a British-led operation here, or the British joining in with the Americans?
That's still being put in place. This is a type of structure which has to remain slightly fluid at the moment, because of who is going to put troops alongside us, where they would be, what type of command structure would be put in place. Clearly, the substantial number of troops and support, logistic support we would put alongside that would mean that we would have a very key role in many of the aspects of taking forward the next phase of this campaign.
Now, we've been talking to some of our correspondents who are in Kabul this morning. What they're reporting, the views of the people there is that if they're going to be foreign troops, the locals want to have Muslims, not British or Americans. Will there be a Muslim contingent in this plan?
Clearly, again, that's one of the things which has been looked at. We have got to find as many nations as possible to work alongside the international coalition on this. We hear what's been said. We understand the sensitivities of that country. It's a very difficult environment into which to put troops. The more nations that join alongside us, then the better chance of success there would be.
Now, you're all scrambling a bit, aren't you? You've all been taken by surprise by the scale, by the size, the speed of the Taliban collapse.
I don't think we're scrambling. I think we always anticipated this was a possibility. We've always said that it wasn't just a military campaign. There was always going to be the diplomatic, the political part of the campaign, as well as the humanitarian side of it. Trying to put together all of these elements of interest was, in a rapidly moving situation, was always going to be difficult. Every effort has been made. Jack Straw, the Foreign Secretary, is part of those discussions at the UN. Jeff Hoon, the Defence Secretary, is in the region at the moment talking to neighbouring states. All of this is very, very difficult to establish and to move forward, but every effort has been made to achieve what we all want to see in Afghanistan. Briefly,
do we have a risk of getting sidetracked here? I thought this was all about getting hold of Osama bin Laden, not trying to keep the peace in Kabul.
We're not going to be sidetracked at all. The main objective is still there. What is important about the military advance and the Northern Alliance in their rapid advance, of course, has closed down the ground, the space into which bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda organisation can retreat into. There's also the very strong possibility of people within that area, maybe Taliban forces as well, that will be prepared to offer them up. So this main objective is getting closer to call all the time.
OK, Adam Ingram, thanks for joining us there from Westminster.
And if you've just joined us, a reminder that we're getting reports that the stronghold of Jalalabad in eastern Afghanistan has fallen. Taliban militia have withdrawn from there, according to the Afghan Islamic press. So we hope to be confirming that a little bit later.
Now we'll be meeting the parents of Britain's first sextuplets, the Waltons, who are about to turn 18. Now we join, though, our news teams across the UK.
Good morning, I'm Mike Kilbane. 2 people have died in an accident this morning on the M42 near Solihull. A lorry collided with another vehicle on the southbound carriageway. All 3 lanes were closed. 2 lanes have now been reopened, but apart from 1 lane closure now between junctions 5 and 4, Solihull and Durridge, the slip road to junction 5 is also closed. A 27-year-old man has been charged with murder after a woman died when a car crashed into a group of 9 people outside a house in Birmingham. 20-year-old Shabana Hussain died after the incident at a house in Saltley. The car became embedded in the wall. The man will appear before magistrates in Birmingham this morning. Junior doctors in hospitals across our region are breaching government guidelines by working more than 56 hours a week. The university hospitals of Coventry and Warwickshire has been warned that 12 doctors could be lost. 80,000 young salmon are due to be released into the River Dove in Staffordshire today. It's the first stage of a 5-year programme. Many salmon disappeared when the river became polluted during the Industrial Revolution. The Trent Salmon Trust will restock the river once a year and build fish passes in weirs. Over 1,000 jobs are to be created in Stoke-on-Trent with the development of a hotel and leisure complex. After a lengthy public inquiry, the government's improved a £100 million scheme at Trentham Gardens. We'll move on to the weather now. It'll be cloudy with patchy rain clearing and then sunny spells for all of us. It's a little bit cold right now, 3 Celsius the temperature, and the maximum today just 7 Celsius. I'll be here with Midlands Today at 1:30 and Sue Beardsmore and Nick Owen are here at 6:30. But now, back to Jeremy and Sian.
Hello, this is Breakfast from BBC News. Stay with us. We're going to be talking to the best-selling crime writer Patricia Cornwell later in the programme.
But now, here's Maura with a summary of the morning's main stories.
Good morning. There are reports of uprisings in Taliban-controlled areas across Afghanistan. Latest unconfirmed reports say Jalalabad has fallen to local Mujahideen commanders. In the last pocket of resistance in the north, about 20,000 Taliban troops are holding out in the city of Kunduz, according to the Northern Alliance. In Kabul, opposition forces have been consolidating their hold on power. The UN and international coalition partners have stressed the need to work towards a new broad-based government in Afghanistan following the capture of the city. Kunduz is one of the few areas in northern Afghanistan still to have a sizable Taliban presence. Our correspondent John Sopel is travelling with Alliance troops and spoke to us earlier in the programme.
What we're hearing from the Northern Alliance is that they believe there are some 20,000 Taliban soldiers dug into the city. What's more ominous, I think, is that they believe that 10,000 of them are foreign soldiers, maybe Chechens or Arabs. In the past, when there have been that sort of combination, there have been big reprisals. I think that if there are that many foreign fighters there, it will be a very bloody battle indeed, and ugly too.
Thousands more British troops have been put on standby to go into Afghanistan. Their mission will be to act as a stabilising force, to allow humanitarian aid into the country and to enable the UN to help create a new government. The MOD have stressed that a final decision on their deployment is yet to be made. A short while ago, the former Foreign Secretary David Owen said America's war on terrorism should not end with the action in Afghanistan. He said there was a need for possible military action in other countries.
I have no doubt whatever that the next step the Americans will take will be to go to Iraq, and I hope the Europeans will show more understanding of it. Personally, I think probably Russia will show more understanding of the need to grapple with Iraq. Having done Iraq, we will have to do something more active on the Middle East and Arab-Israeli dispute, and we'll also have to deal with Syria.
President Bush has told the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, that America will cut its nuclear arsenal by about 2/3 in the next 10 years. The announcement came after talks in which Mr. Putin said that Russia would aim to match the cuts. The two leaders will now try to resolve the more divisive issue of America's national missile defense plans. Investigators looking into Monday's American Airlines plane crash in New York say they've made a major breakthrough. The cockpit voice recorder has revealed that there were rattling noises on board seconds before the aircraft came down in New York City. A British woman is now known to be among the dead. President Bush has signed an order that will allow special military courts to be established to try foreigners accused of terrorist offences. A spokesman said the use of military rather than civilian courts gave the president an additional tool to bring those responsible for the September 11th attacks to justice. And that's the news so far. Now it's back to Jeremy.
Maura, thanks very much. Let's have a little look at what's coming up later on in the programme, shall we? At 20 to 9, the Walton sextuplets have come of age. Their parents, Graham and Janet, will be joining us in the studio to tell us about their extraordinary family.
The young stars of what's tipped to be the biggest movie ever work their magic here at 1:45.
And perhaps the world's most successful living crime writer, Patricia Cornwall, will be with us at 10 to 9.
But before all that, Rob's here with the sport, and our youngsters have been doing quite well, haven't they?
Yes, I think the focus of most England football fans is on the senior side, but there was a glimpse of the future last night at Pride Park in Derby. A 1-0 win for the England under-21 side in their playoff for the European Championships next summer against Holland. They'd drawn the first leg 2-2. And yesterday at Pride Park, 32,000 people there. Big crowd for an under-21, you know, very enthusiastic. And here's the goal that won it in the second half from West Ham's Michael Carrick. Just knocked in there from, what, 3 or 4 yards. And it was a pretty tough game. And I have to say that manager David Platt there had a lot of praise afterwards for the goalkeeper, Chris Kirkland of Liverpool. He made a number of vital saves towards the end. Kirkland's only played once for Liverpool this season, the first team, in the Worthington Cup, but he certainly pulled out the stops there.
That's pretty good.
No, it's very good. It's all about the England future, of course, as well, and whether those guys will come on and perhaps even stake a claim in the main squad for the World Cup. Moving on to cricket, of course, England's cricketers, this tour that we've been talking about, what it seems for the last 2 months or so, and whether or not it should go ahead. Of course, it is going ahead. They've arrived at Bombay International Airport. None of them have actually played test matches in India before. 16-man squad, and the security very tight indeed. The Indian police under instructions from the Indian government to make sure that the public and indeed the media are kept at a distance. You can see that's a pretty long shot on a long lens there of the players getting into what looks like is it a coach or I'm not sure. Perhaps they're just going into a building. But anyway,
it's difficult though, isn't it? I mean, trying to keep a low profile.
Well, absolutely. Of course, cricket is absolutely the top sport in India. You know. So there will be tensions ahead, I'm sure, for the players, and it's going to be a very tough test simply on terms of the playing. Never mind what happens around the matches themselves.
But it's a great country to visit.
Absolutely. As far as rugby is concerned, interesting team news for the weekend's matches, 2 of which are on the BBC. Wales playing Tonga. Iestyn Harris switched from flying half to centre. You're pleased with that? Well, if you're pleased, I'm pleased. 8 changes, 4 of them positional. England have made 9 changes, 2 positional for the game against Romania at Twickenham, and that introduces Charlie Hodgson of Sale, which is an interesting introduction for him. And also, well, Ireland, they're playing the All Blacks, of course, on Saturday. That really is the big game of the weekend, as far as I'm concerned. And they return effectively to the lineup that beat England in the final match of the Six Nations. Now, on to Vinnie Jones. Is it, I wonder, football? Is it showbiz? He's a hard man at the midfield. Exactly, a hard man at the silver screen. I suppose we could say both of those. He's made a brief, and I think probably temporary, return to football for Carlisle United at Shelbourne, and that happened last night, and our own Andy Swiss was there.
3 years on, and it seems little has changed for Vinnie Jones.
Bang on, I'm nicking this as well.
As entrances go, last night's for Carlisle wasn't quite Oscar-winning material, but then everybody already knows his very colourful script. The unlikely story of how an X-rated footballer became a PG-rated Hollywood hardman. For one friendly match, though, it was back to basics. An early brush with officialdom, followed by a display that was predictably muscular, but unpredictable in pretty much everything else. It wasn't enough for victory, as Carlisle were ultimately beaten 4-2, but their guest star refused to fluff his lines.
I tried to play the Beckham role on the right wing in the end. That's me bow out of football now. Do the acting, you can have a couple of drinks and a few late nights, a couple of cigars, get up in the morning, go to work. That'd do me.
Carlisle, though, may have other ideas. They're struggling to stay in the Football League and aren't ruling out an encore for their thumping thespian.
If he did say to you, how do you fancy another game, would you be interested?
Would you refuse, Vinnie? I couldn't refuse him. big strong man, I couldn't.
So, could this all-action hero rescue his chums from the evil clutches of relegation? Well, if Vinnie Jones can add a touch of Hollywood magic to Carlisle United, it could be his most blockbusting performance yet. Andy Swiss, BBC News at Shelbourne in Dublin.
Such a temporary comeback, it seems. He's retired again. So there we are. That's the last we've seen of Vinnie Jones.
He can always come back. Thanks very much, Rob.
That's right.
Now, this Sunday, there's going to be a very special birthday celebration. Hannah, Lucy, Ruth, Sarah, Kate and Jenny are all going to be 18. But the coming of age for this bunch of teenagers is remarkable, to say the least, as they are the Waltons, the world's first surviving all-girl sextuplets. Well, tonight, a BBC documentary charts key moments in their lives, and we're going to be seeing what they're up to now. In a moment, we're going to be speaking to their parents, Graham and Janet, about what it was like to be thrust into the media glare. First, though, let's take a look at the Walton girls' come of age.
My lovely little babies. My gorgeous little girls are now horrible.
Sorry, Kate.
We have wall-to-wall hormones. It's out of control. It is. I've lost it. I mean, even our dog's a bitch, you know. They're arguing and fighting all the time. It's usually over clothes, you know. You can hear it, you know, you've been in my wardrobe and taken this and shouting and screaming at each other. Oh, Kate, you know, she said to me, "Don't worry, Dad," she said. "These mood swings are only hormonal."
Indeed, Mum and Dad, Janet and Graham, join us now. Thanks very much for coming in. All those hormones, all that disco music, must be bedlam in your house.
Certainly is.
Oh, dear.
You both look very well on it.
Yeah,
It must be quite,
thank you.
coming to a TV studio must seem quite calm after your place.
It is actually, yes.
Lovely.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
It's very peaceful in here. So you relax while you can.
Yeah. Expensive party, though, if they're both they were all 18. It's going to be quite a big business, isn't it?
Well, we had a meeting about the party earlier on in the year, and we decided that we'd go on holiday. So we've been on holiday to Mallorca all together, which was wonderful. So actually on Sunday we're having a family party, lunchtime-ish.
Do they get on?
On the whole,
really,
yeah.
they do. I mean, they get on basically, but we have some stinking rows, you know, fighting. And, you know. It's family and it's family life, you know.
Yeah.
It's healthy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose so, yeah. I suppose so. I mean, I remember speaking to you that when I was a journalist in Liverpool, and the children were that big, and the 18 years has gone so fast, doesn't it? Really,
it does.
Has it?
Yeah.
Well, perhaps not for you.
It has really. I mean, people
has.
told us when they were babies, they said to us, a lot of people said to us, look after them, enjoy them, because in the blink of an eye they'll be gone. And really, it has gone like that.
Yeah.
It's the truth, you know.
Are they all very different? Have they turned out very different?
Yeah,
kids?
they have actually, yes. But really from day one we've encouraged the girls to be individuals, and perhaps we're reaping the benefits, or not so much now. Some of them are more outspoken than others. But it would have been easy to lump them all together, but it would not have been fair at all. So we've always gone down the individual road.
Well, they look very pretty and must be terrorising the local boys.
They are, yes.
Yeah. We've always got boys in the house, yeah, queuing up at the gate, you know.
I bet you have.
It's true, yeah.
You know, for a father, I would have thought it must be, you know, with one daughter. I've got one daughter who's 10 months old, so it's a bit early for all that. But you know, I'm already thinking, well, how would I be? How protective would I be? I mean, look, you've got 6.
I know, yeah. You beautiful girls, and you got all these lads coming every night. You know, it's not easy.
Well, how do you deal with it?
It's not easy. Well, it's life, it's what happens, you know. And Janet says to me, calm down, you know, all right. He's a nice lad. This is Janet. He's a nice lad, leave him alone.
Yeah, it's life, I suppose, but it's life multiplied by 6.
Well, yes, but we've always had sort of an open house policy. You know, everyone has always come back to our house. We've always had a big crowd there, and so actually we know most of the girls' friends anyway. And it's you know, a great crowd and great crack at our house all the time. I bet it is.
Seems to me you probably must be dreading the moment they fly the nest.
I think so.
Mixed feelings.
You paused there. Hesitation.
No, it'd be sad, wouldn't it?
It will be sad.
Particularly, I mean, it won't all go at once. But if they did, I mean, it'd be very sad, wouldn't it? Yeah. And it'd be so quiet. Because it's so noisy in the house, you know. We'd miss that, you know.
Yeah.
Because you get used to it, don't you? You get used to anything, don't you, eventually? And it's so loud and noisy all the time.
Yes, yes. You were really thrust, I mean, we mentioned it before, you were really thrust into the media spotlight when the girls were born, weren't you? And,
yeah.
and I remember talking to you as well about how you were going to cope, and lots of people getting in contact with you, lots of baby manufacturers of baby clothes and nappies and things like that, and trying to get you on board. I mean, how difficult was it for you in those early years?
Well, the reason, I mean, really, the media attention came with the girls, and we were, you know, that came as part of it, and really we've coped with that very well, I think. We didn't get as much as people imagined in kind of freebies at the beginning.
No, I'm sure you didn't.
Really, basically, the reason for doing the media and the television at the beginning was Gray took a year out from the painting and decorating business so that we could have hands-on at home, and that's what we needed, really, wasn't it? And that money that we made then compensated for Gray's salary.
Yeah, it was just something that had to be done. You know, we had to accept the media side of it, and we've learned to enjoy it and have a bit of fun with it. You know.
I bet you needed every penny. I mean, how long did it take you to feel adapted to being the parents of 6 kids, 6 girls?
Well, I think we adapted straight away. There was no choice, we did, and we're very practical people, and really we just got on with it from day one. The fantastic thing was that the girls were all so fit and well, and really everything else after that was secondary.
It certainly was. I mean, it could have been the other way. We've seen it happen before with multiple births, you know. Things can go wrong, and, you know, thank God things didn't, and things have gone from when they were born and when they were fit and healthy to this present day, touch wood. We've been, you know, we've been blessed, really. Particularly over the health things, you know.
When are they 18? Are they 18 already? Or
No, the birthday's on Sunday.
So you've got a lot of presents to buy by then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thanks to both of you. Thanks for coming in. Send our best to the girls as well.
Yeah. We will do. Thank you very much indeed.
And if you want to see the Walton Girls come of age, it's tonight on BBC One at 5 to 9.
Now, the most famous wizard since Merlin hits Britain's cinemas on Friday as Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone opens across the country.
Our arts correspondent Rosie Millard has been talking to the film's 3 child stars, including Harry Potter himself.
How did you feel when you got the part?
I cried. I was so happy.
It was so cool.
It was just amazing.
You're a wizard, Harry.
I'm a what?
Lots and lots of children will have their own idea of Harry Potter in their heads. Does that worry you?
I've done what I thought Harry would be like. Everybody is always going to have their opinion of what something looks like, and I can't change that.
Mr. Potter, our new celebrity.
Apparently your parents weren't that keen on you going up for this role. How did you persuade them that this was what you wanted to do?
I have a tendency to get my hopes up, and they knew that there were so many famous boys auditioning for the parts.
Fame isn't everything, is it, Mr. Potter?
They didn't want me to get my hopes up and then be really disappointed.
Petrificus totalis.
You're a little scary sometimes.
I really wanted this part because at the time I was the biggest Harry Potter fan.
Now, the premiere was a big deal.
Yeah.
And how did you feel when you faced the world's press?
It was scary. It was really scary. I was so nervous as well. But I enjoyed it. It was quite cool as well.
I'm going to bed before either of you come up with another clever idea to get us killed. Or worse, expelled.
I think that she's got some great lines to say. I love most of my lines.
Hello, Hamora.
Get in.
Alohomora. Standard Book of Spells, Chapter 7.
Some other children might think it'd be great kind of missing out on school for a whole year. Did you mind missing out on school?
I did in a way. I missed my school friends. It was quite hard to be the only girl among 20 boys, I don't know how many. So I missed my girlfriends, but and I miss my teachers in a way. I know that's not really Hermione-ish, but I do. Excuse me.
What precious way on your left, madam?
Excuse me, sir. Can you tell me where I might find platform 9 3/4?
9 3/4? Think you're being funny, do you?
How will you feel, though, this Christmas? Your image will be on thousands of toys underneath thousands of trees up and down the country.
You know, I'd never thought of that. Never thought I'd be under a Christmas tree. That's an amazing thought. Yeah, it's because it's obviously a great privilege, because how many boys my age get to have their pictures on buses and billboards and everything like that. I thought it was really amazing.
Not many would want to have their pictures all over the billboards, I would imagine, at the age of, what is he, 10?
That's how much dosh you get for it, I suppose.
I suppose
And the glory,
so.
it's the glory.
It's the glory. We're going to stay with mystery now, because Patricia Cornwell is often described as the queen of modern crime fiction. Her literary creation, Dr. Kay Scarpetta, has become almost as famous as she has.
But her latest book features a rare foray into dark comedy, and Dr. Scarpetta is nowhere to be found. Well, Patricia's with us now here in the studio.
Hello.
Big welcome to you. You've taken a bit of a departure here.
Well, Isle of Dogs is the third in a second series that I've started, which is very well described by you as a dark comedy that takes you into the world of law enforcement from a totally different point of view, which is where you see absurdity in what I would call far side humor, but it points at societal issues that we all need to be aware of. It gives us a chance to laugh at ourselves in a way that is not offensive as it would be if you were didactic about these issues that I sort of poke fun at in the book.
Were you a bit wary of doing something different just because you're so closely associated with Dr. Kay Scarpetta? You've sold 70 million books about it.
I'm still wary of it. I'm very well aware that when you are well known for a particular series, such as the Scarpetta series, there is an insatiable demand on the part of readers for another Scarpetta book. And at first, they really don't want to see you do anything else. And so, but as a writer, I have to allow myself to grow and to write what I need to write. And I do have a sense of humor and do see the absurdities and the social ironies of life that even are very much penetrated into the world of law enforcement. And it gives me a chance to have another protagonist, and I very much love Andy Brazil, and it's fun to work with a male protagonist for once as well.
Can you put your finger on just what it is in your books that have made them such a huge hit?
You know, this will sound really strange, but I think there's a certain amount of love that goes into my books and passion, in that not only do I have very strong feelings about justice and abuse of power and the very things that I write about, but I really care about my readers. When I sit down and I'm working on a book, even if it's the second series where I know maybe a lot of people still want Scarpetta, I'm thinking about something that I can write for them that I want them to know. I have something to say. And I believe the energy that goes with that is something they feel, and it energizes them as they read my books.
And the amount of research you put in as well. I mean, you were a crime reporter, and then you spent a lot of time in a morgue, which
yes, 6
sounds
years.
pretty horrific.
6 years every day, and I went there to do the research, and I couldn't write either series without that base of knowledge, and I continue to do that research. For example, even in Isle of Dogs, there is a morgue scene, and in fact, Scarpetta does make a very brief appearance in this book as a cameo appearance, because there's a scene that takes place at the Richmond morgue, and I said, well, I can't make somebody else the chief. It has to be her. So for the first time ever, the readers get to see her from the outside. You see her from across the room instead of from the first person point of view, which is inside her out. So you get to watch her a little bit from a distance like you might in a movie.
Do you still do all the research? You still go riding around with the police?
Yeah. I still do all the research. In fact, my most recent research has been spending a lot of time with Scotland Yard here in England. I've been over here about 9 times since May. So yes, and that's been an absolutely fabulous experience.
Do a lot of people associate you with Dr. Kay Scarpetta? Is there sometimes a bit of confusion when your fans come and see you as to basically how close you are to the character, how much she is like you, you are like her?
Yes, there is I think a lot of people do project that onto me, and in fact they say ridiculous things like, you ought to play her in the movie, and I said, if you saw me act, you would never ever request such a thing as that.
Who would star as
you know,
Dr.
I
Kay
don't know.
Scarpetta
It needs to be somebody who can lose herself in the part so that she becomes Scarpetta instead of you being mindful the whole time that she is some megastar.
So you wouldn't want to start doing it then?
Would I?
Well, you wouldn't want to start playing Scarpetta?
No. Would I want to do that?
No, a star. I mean,
a
big screen actress.
If the person is capable of, well, she's a wonderful actress. I think that she could certainly lose herself in a role, and you would believe that she is Scarpetta. I don't have any real choice. I don't have any real choices over that because I just don't know. I don't know who would be a good Scarpetta.
What got you into writing in the first place?
It's just my most natural form of expression. I've always done it ever since I was a child. I suppose it is my voice. When no one else would listen, it gave me a chance to say what I needed to say.
And when you had the idea for the book, were they immediately snapped up by publishers?
Absolutely not. When I went to work at the medical examiner's office for research back in 1984, I wrote 3 full-length novels that were all rejected, and one of the things that was said is nobody's interested in reading about morgues, and certainly not interested in a woman who might work in one.
You mentioned your childhood. You had a very interesting childhood, didn't you? I mean, you were left on the doorstep of Billy Graham's house, the TV evangelist. What sort of influence did that give you?
Well, the Grahams have had a tremendous influence on me throughout my entire life in terms of, not that we necessarily would agree on everything in life, but that's what makes them so special, is because they're such truly loving people, and they are not about themselves. And I think that is so important, whether you're a writer or a politician or an evangelist or anything you do, that you are not really about yourself. You can have a strong ego, but that you are thinking about other people and what it is you're here to do for them.
Okay, Patricia Cornwell, thanks very
Thank
much.
you
Best
very
of luck
much.
with the new book.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming in. Let's go to the weather now, see what's going on outside.
The sun may be shining, Jeremy, but I'm still cold here this morning. It's been a frosty start for many and a foggy start in the southeast of Scotland. That's really the main hazard for travellers over the next couple of hours. It'll take time to clear. Otherwise, it's been a dryish start in the north. We've got plenty of sunshine in eastern England, just 1 or 2 wintry showers flirting with the Norfolk coast, the Kent coast too. We've had a lot of cloud though through Wales and the West Midlands, around the Manchester region. By lunchtime, that will have slipped into the southwest of England, and behind it, the cloud will slowly lift and break. So the afternoon should be brighter for many parts of England and Wales, drier too. Just 1 or 2 rogue showers around. By then, however, we'll have more cloud and patchy rain moving into the northwest. At least here it'll be milder than yesterday, say 10 degrees in Belfast, but barely above, say 6 or 7 in some parts of East Anglia and South East. Still a bit of a breeze coming down from the north here. And tonight it will be very cold in the south, temperatures plummeting to -3 in the suburbs. But after a chilly evening for northern England, temperatures will lift later in the night as that cloud across Scotland and Northern Ireland slips southwards. So milder in the north, misty, murky, grey starts and fog in the south, and that's really how we'll start off tomorrow. In fact, the outlook, if you take a look at the outlook with me for the next few days, is largely dry and fine, but we'll have a lot of cloud and some patchy fog and patchy fog and frost problems. I'll get that one out. There we go. Back to you two in the studio. See you tomorrow.
I'm glad you said that rather than I, because I wouldn't be able to get through it either.
You sound a bit like me. It's the kind of thing I say in the morning. Patchy fog problems, fog problems.
Oh, now let's get the latest from the BBC's newsrooms across the UK.
Good morning, I'm Mike Kilbane. 2 people have died in an accident this morning on the M42 near Solihull. A lorry collided with another vehicle on the southbound carriageway. One lane is closed now between junction 5 and 4, Solihull and Dorridge. The slip road to junction 5 is also closed. A 27-year-old man has been charged with murder after a woman died when a car crashed into a group of 9 people outside a house in Birmingham. 20-year-old Shabana Hussain died after the incident at a house in Saltley. The car became embedded in the wall. The man will appear before magistrates in Birmingham this morning. Junior doctors in hospitals across our region are breaching government guidelines by working more than 56 hours a week. The university hospitals of Coventry and Warwickshire has been warned that 12 doctors could be lost. 80,000 young salmon are due to be released into the River Dove in Staffordshire today. It's the first stage of a 5-year programme. Many salmon disappeared when the river became polluted during the Industrial Revolution. The river will be restocked once a year and fish passes built in weirs. The weather now. Cloudy with patchy rain clearing, then sunny spells for all of us. 3 Celsius now, the maximum 7 Celsius. In Midlands today, that's at 1:30, but that's all for now from the Breakfast team. Have a good morning.
Last look now, this morning's main news. There are reports of uprising in Taliban-controlled areas right across Afghanistan. Latest unconfirmed reports say Jalalabad has fallen to local Mujahideen commanders.
The Ministry of Defence has put thousands more British troops on standby to go out to Afghanistan.
And investigators looking into Monday's plane crash in New York say the cockpit voice recorder has revealed rattling noises on board seconds before the aircraft came down. That's it from us this morning.
More throughout the day on News 24, but we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Yeah, come back then. Bye.